Hello, Peter. You have just finished the first day of your Hearing Voices workshop in Prague. How do you feel? Are you tired or something like that?
A little tired. It's very hard work, but it's worth it. We've been interviewed by some really fascinating people, really good thinkers.
Okay. Which energy did you feel here from these people? I guess that a lot of them are social workers or psychologists. I heard from them that they admire you because you are sharing your story, and you hear the same story in Maastricht dialogue all the time, again and again.
Yeah, it can be difficult. It's been a good mixture of social workers, peer workers, social work managers, and it is difficult telling your story over and over again because it's quite an intimate process. There's a lot of questions in that interview that often don't get asked. But through my time in psychiatric care, I wanted to be asked, but no one did ask, so I couldn't reclaim my life. So the way I look at it, I've had a very difficult experience through childhood and going into psychiatric care. But because of the commitment to people here that's given the time and working really hard, if they go away and help one person, then my journey's been worth it.
Thank you. You mentioned the psychiatric care. Did you ever received some help from this care? I don't mean formally, but really personally.
Not when I was in services, no. Basically what I was just given was antipsychotics and left to get on with my own devices. But in fairness, there was one occupational therapist called Sally, and she was really influential on my life. And she was here today. If you said, what did you do for Peter? She would say, nothing. But I supported him to do it. And I came off all my drugs because I couldn't recover while I was on them. I was taking 25 drugs a day. And as far as I was concerned, the psychiatric system had a vested interest in my madness. So they could keep me taking drugs and control me. But when I got out of service, I could come off the drugs and I could understand my experiences more. And I understood that the voices are a perfectly normal reaction to the things that happened in my life. And once I could make sense with them, the relationship of the voices changed. You know, some of the things they say now are not nice, but it's reminding me of things in my life that I still need to address.
The last sentence, sorry.
When some of the things that the voices talk about, they're not easy to hear. They're quite difficult. Mm-hmm. But I'm aware now that they're talking about things in my life that I still need to address. My main voice calls me a murderer all the time because I haven't dealt with the guilt of the death of my son and the death of my mum. So I feel like a murderer at times. I didn't murder them, but I've got guilt because I didn't keep them alive. So from a metaphorical perspective, that my voices are saying you need to deal with that guilt or you will always feel like a murderer.
Do you find it difficult to have this quite interesting, impressive relationship to the voices while being on the psychiatric medication? Is it now better to more easily accessible for you?
It's a lot more accessible for me because I had no clarity of thought and I was sleeping 23 hours a day. I couldn't walk, all my body was stiff, my limbs were stiff, and I couldn't even engage with the voices. They were frightening, I thought they were demonic, and I just had no control of my mind to try and make sense of them. But now I'm off them and I'm more clear-minded, I can make sense of them. And I have a relationship with my voices. And for years I was always told, ignore the voices, they're not real. And I used to think, well, if they're not real, why are you giving me medication? It doesn't make any sense. And the more I ignored them, the more they shouted. And in later life I realised, well, it takes two people to maintain a conflict. I always give an example. If you go home one evening and you have an argument with whoever you live with, and 7 days later you're still having the same argument, you have to say, am I missing the point of what this person's saying? Because there's no resolution. So sometimes I have to back off and look, what are these voices really saying to me? Maybe I'm the problem by not listening. And that's how we form the relationship and I make sense of the experience.
Mm-hmm. I heard that you even somehow that you don't pay a lot of attention to psychiatrists, like diagnosis, the discourse of psychiatry, medication. You were diagnosed schizophrenia, so as me, it's the same same case, like in the...
Yeah, well, for me, schizophrenia doesn't exist. It's just a made-up word. There is no biological or genetic test you can do to say that you've got it. It's all based on behaviour, and that's where psychiatry falls down. You cannot diagnose anyone on behaviour. You've got to look at the thoughts, the feelings, or the voices that's creating that behaviour. So if you've got no biological cause, why do you give someone medication? You can't have a biological cure for something that's got no biological cause. The whole diagnostic procedure is nonsense. You can have 15 people in one room with nothing in common in life experience and symptom profile and all get the same diagnosis, so it cannot be safe.
I translated a movie, American movie, for subtitles, Healing Voices. Do you know that movie?
Yes, I know it. I know Oryx Cohen that made it, yeah. I know a lot of the people that's in it. So yeah, it's interesting. For me personally, it was nothing I didn't know, but it's been well received and it's raised a lot of good awareness, which is good, especially in America.
For me, this is really inspiring some emancipation and also a strong disbelief in psychiatric discourse, what they are saying.
I don't honestly think you will find anyone in psychiatric care that hasn't had a traumatic life experience. That's different traumas. I'm not always talking about child sex abuse. Traumas come in many different forms. But if you look at the work of NSYNC in 1992, it categorically showed if you do not talk about trauma, the brain will speak to itself about it. Now that can manifest as voices. Now we have to be very careful. The traumatic experiences I had about being raped in childhood, I know I hear my rapist voices. So if someone says to me, well, okay, Peter, you had a bad childhood, I'm sorry to hear that, but because you've got faulty biology and genetics, you'd have still finished up here anyway. As far as I'm concerned, the person that makes that statement is colluding with abusers. So they have to be very careful.
That was my another question, the question about trauma and later the experiences which are not quite normal. This question is about abuse and trauma. I had similar experiences as I remember on the school and also in childhood. Do you think, how do you think that it's good for people to work with these traumas by psychotherapy or energy medicine? Or
I think it's about talking about it. It's not always about any psychodynamic therapy or psychotherapeutic therapy. It's just so the person's heard and make sense of those experiences. What Shaun and I have been doing today with the Maastricht interview is let people interview us about all our lives. Then they have to write a report and a construct about it. And when you get the construct, which basically shows you who the voices represent and what they represent in the person's life, all they've done is ask questions, they've gathered information. But when we see that, we can say, well, actually, I'm not a flawed human being. It's a perfectly normal reaction to the adverse life experiences I've had. And then you start to make sense of the experience. Why do I need medication to deal with something that's happened in my life? It's totally different, because if you look at the whole thing, what the argument is a lot from psychiatry is, how come some people have trauma and they don't have any kind of mental health problems? Well, it's very easy to answer. If you look at the work of Whitfield, what he did in San Diego, he looked at adverse childhood experiences. He looked at 8 different things like battered mothers, incarcerated household member, bullying, sex abuse, many, many different things. And child sexual abuse was the most robust predictor of psychosis, even after controlling for depression. But what he looked at the dose effect, and that was very significant, because trauma comes in many forms. It could be bullying at school, loss of a cherished pet. That might not tip you over into psychosis, but it can be problematic for some people. But ritualistic abuse, prolonged combat trauma did. But there was a researcher in Australia called Spataro, and she wanted to discredit all trauma theories. So basically she went and looked at police and forensic records of a lot of men in prison that had been traumatised as children, variable traumas, and it was a big study. And she interviewed them all, and none of them got any type of psychosis. Got behavioural problems, because they're in prison. So she basically said your trauma theories are nonsense. But a friend of mine, Paul Hammersley, he researched Spataro's research, and his findings were fascinating. He said, she's correct, but she's missed something. All these men were traumatised as children, but 2 significant things happened. One is, they're removed from that situation very, very quickly. So it's a reduced dose effect, it's not prolonged, or they had therapy as children. It's a non-disclosure of trauma where we go back to NSYNC. If you don't talk about it, it manifests into psychosis. So with children being traumatised, you've got to remove them from that situation very quickly or give them therapy as children, and then you don't get the psychosis in adulthood.
Now you work in the hearing voices movement. What's the sense of self-help, or what are the main values you try to embody in your
But for me, it's about normalising the experience. You know, hearing voices is a common human experience. There's more healthy people hearing voices than what there are ill people hearing voices. And it's about people with lived experience helping other people with lived experience, and to normalise the experience, get the support that they need, make sense of the experience. And it's currently the fastest growing user movement in the world. We've now got networks across, I think it's about 36 countries. So people are looking for something different. That's the important thing. And I think for me, and it's something that's really, really important, and it's something that happened to me many, many years ago. When I was in psychiatric care, I was told never to tell anybody that I heard voices. Shaun was a very good friend of mine. I spent 10 years on psychiatric wards with him. Neither of us knew each other heard voices because we weren't encouraged to speak about it. But when I went into a hearing voices group, it was like a liberation process. At last I'm not alone. And you hear that so many times. I thought there was only me. And it breaks down those barriers and that shame. And it actually, you become part of something. It's like moving into a really big, close family.
And I thought a bit, personally, how it's possible to find some common dialogue between some good psychiatrist or good psychotherapist and people with schizophrenia diagnosed, some strange experiences, who want themselves to liberate. Yeah. I mean, this is a dialogue with liberation impact, and the doctors, they like to speak in other way. Do you think that only on the level of language is it possible to make some work to find some common themes?
I think so, definitely. It's a very, very important question. And I think times are changing. What you have to understand is the wheels of mental health grind very slowly. But as long as they're moving, it's an improvement. And we have to remember the founder of the Hearing Voices movement, Professor Marius Rom, is a psychiatrist. I think that's something that people forget. It's very important. Now, Shaun and I and the rest of our team, we have many psychiatrists come on this training, a hell of a lot. We don't alienate. It's very important. They're here for a reason because they're looking for change. And I think what the user movement's got to understand is you cannot just change from the outside. You've got to change from the inside as well. So it's the people that you're talking about that fundamentally think we need to change our service. You need to collaborate with, change from the inside and give them support from the outside. Because there are people in there that look at it differently. They probably get marginalised by their own peers, but they are in there ticking away. And if they're in there putting this ethos and ideas into patients that they're working with, that they were learning from us, then those changes, they start to gather pace a little bit.
Thank you. So I'm speaking with Shaun Hunt. Is it okay? You are here in Prague to have a workshop with Petera Bullimore, and my question is about your yesterday workshop about paranoia. What do you think about this this fact? Or maybe, if you want, you can also say something about you, because we made some preparation to speak with Peter, but not we don't know enough information about you. Where are you from, and what you are doing?
Yeah, well, I'm Shaun. I work quite often with Peter. I also work as a lecturer in England, basically around recovery and mental health. I've experienced my own mental health problems for many, many years. Began hearing voices when I was 8 years old. I've also had lots of sort of experiences of what people call paranoia. I don't really hold that much with paranoia myself, because I believe that when we use the words such as delusions, paranoia, which is often around psychiatry, it suggests that these things are not real. I lost a lot of my life believing that the police were following me, believing lots of other, wild, outrageous things that seem really strange to people on the outside. It's only when I work with a man who helped me to understand that these things that I believe, these things that I feel are based in truth. And I think everybody you speak to who might hold some ideas that seem strange to us, when you look away and pull away, right at the bottom is truth. It might have got exaggerated and, blown out of proportion, but it always begins in truth. And for me, looking at it in that way has helped me to carry on with my life. And I still hear voices. I still trouble at times with some of the thoughts that I have, but I have a different way of thinking about it now that helps me to move forward.
For me, as I have also some experiences with Paranoia, it's about speaking about when you have some strange ideas, like I had that I am sort of Jesus Christ or something like this. You have to work on it in a symbolic way or something like this. Does this help? The work with words and ideas and fantasies, like with informations symbolically coded.
Yeah, I think it's trying to work out sort of quite often metaphors about meaning, and I think finding that seed of truth. And once you find the seed of truth, then you can begin to work with that and unravel the belief system that might be troubling people. But it's not always about getting rid of a belief system. If I say to you today, I'm an alien, but I get on with life, everything's absolutely fine, it's not really a problem, is it? If I said to you, I'm an alien and I feel persecuted and the whole world's after me, then I perhaps need to start working on this and understanding it. But quite often I think what psychiatry is doing is trying to rid people of the voices, trying to rid people of the belief systems. And to be quite honest, the belief systems that we develop are often to keep us safe, in a world that doesn't make a lot of sense for whatever experience that was. The way that we've interpreted the world and make sense is keeping us safe. So to dismantle that and take it away can often be quite damaging for people. But I think it's about making that secondary. Whilst you can still have beliefs, you can still hear voices, as long as it's not overtaking your life. So I think it's finding the truth and what started this off. And that's some of the work that myself and Peter do with the Maastricht interview. Today we've been doing voices, but we also work with one for thoughts, beliefs and paranoia to try and unpick and find out where this has come from. Once we find where it's come from, we can help to make that secondary for people. I think quite often with people's belief systems, we try to take it away.
Yeah.
And that doesn't always need to happen. People can have belief systems, even if they seem strange to somebody on the outside. I think when there's a problem, when it's damaging a person's quality of life, we perhaps need to help that person make sense maybe in a different way. But we often try and come in and just try and take that away, where that is usually a safety net for a person, that belief system. It's the way that they've made sense of the world.
I guess that's also normal. The so-called normal people have large belief systems in career or in children or in everything.
I think everybody in the world will have a belief system that might seem strange to somebody else. I believe my local football team, Sheffield Wednesday, are going to get promoted soon. Mm-hmm. That's a strange belief system, but we all have them. We all have things that we believe that might, when we tell others, they might think it's outrageous. But we all have these belief systems. It's the way that we interpret and make sense of the world as we've experienced it.
Which league did they play? Second?
Championship. Yeah, second. Second. In England, yeah, championship.
Uh-huh.
I would like to ask you, because my problem is paranoia in my life. So I would like to ask you one question: if it is possible to jump out of the escalation of the paranoid feelings with or without medication.
I think it is. I mean, I'm not one that gets into the argument too much about medication, because some people, find relief, some people don't. Personally, it's not for me. But I think certainly jumping out, one of the basis of the workshop that we did yesterday was looking at the different stages of paranoia. And if you can identify when things are becoming problematic at the beginning, you can step back, hopefully, and prevent that escalating. And I think that comes from understanding where it's come from, understanding what the fears, what the thoughts are that people is experiencing at that time. I can give you an example for my own life. When I became hospitalised, I had a really intense paranoia about the police. I believed that the police were chasing me, they were following me everywhere that I went, they was controlling my life and so on. I was eventually diagnosed with paranoid schizophrenia. That's what how psychiatry made sense of what I was experiencing. It's only when a guy came along and worked with me and tried to unpack my past and what we delved into, and I spoke to him about, when I was a very young boy, somebody hurt me quite a lot, and every time he would hurt me, he would say to me, if you ever tell anybody about this, the police will take you away, they will hurt you, they're watching you, they know who you speak to all the time. Now when that goes in as a young child, I try to put a lid on that, try and prevent it, but it's still there. So it's later in life, it's about me understanding that the reason I feel paranoid about the police is because of the experiences in my past life. If we can make the connections between what's happening now and what's happened previously, we can break that link in the middle and try and stop it happening again so it becomes a problem. So I think certainly we can prevent people cycling through the stages of paranoia. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. But we have to understand, where it's come from and the links between past and present.
Mm-hmm. So the link between past and present, this is important.
Yeah, very. I mean, I understand my experiences now because I understand where they came from and I understand what triggers them. So when I see a police car somewhere around now, it might make me a little bit fluttery, I might be a little bit nervous, but I don't escalate because I understand why I feel like this because of what happened to me as a child.
I survived something that I call a delusion because of lack of terms. Now I heard about new word which is construct that you use. Is it right?
I think words are very, very important. The words that we use certainly shape how we view things. I don't like the word delusion because I think delusion suggests it's not real. Now, when you're experiencing it, it's real. It's real for the person who experiences that. Delusion just says, no, it's not real. I think construct is a very good word to use because I think what that does is saying how you've constructed your reality, and that will be based upon the world as you viewed it. Every single one of us will have a different construct based upon how we've experienced life, how we've experienced things. We'll have constructed our own reality. So I think construct is a really good way to describe it rather than delusion, which is dismissive.
If I use always the word delusion, was concerning many actors, many things, many ways, but the principle was the enclosure in the psychiatric hospital. So my question is, can the hospitals and the psychiatric system, help with the paranoia, or can this enforce these feelings?
I think that depends on what the basis of the thoughts are, your belief systems are, the paranoia are. Certainly for me, the paranoia was about the police, and I was detained in a hospital where the police would come and get me when I absconded, so it could absolutely reinforce things for me. For other people, it can't, but I think I've heard people express something similar, as you just said, where people were on a hospital ward and thought this was a play. This was a film that was being acted out, and it doesn't seem like the reality that we've constructed becomes a false reality. So I think certainly yes, it can reinforce a lot of what people are feeling. A lot of paranoia is based around persecution as well, and when you're detained in hospital wards and people are giving you drugs against your will, it can certainly reinforce these negative feelings that people have. Definitely.